Perfect. Well, y'all, we are on week 3 of our series, How to See God. It's been such an incredible series. Throughout this series, we've been talking about how you can see God at work in your everyday life. Because we've talked about, can you really physically see God in your everyday life? Physically. Is it just some guy walking around being like, what's up? No, right? So how can we actually see God in our everyday lives? That's what we've been talking about throughout this series. You can see evidence of God all around you if you truly pay attention. So we're going to continue the series. Phones away, please. Phones away. I wanted to share this story with you. I might have shared this before, a long time ago, but I remember when I was fresh out of high school, and I no longer wanted to work at Burger King. That was my first job, was working at Burger King. It was not pleasant, and it wasn't anything to be proud of. So I was like, I'm gonna go get myself a real job. And so you know what I did? I applied for a coffee shop and became a barista because that feels cooler. And then you don't go home smelling like French fries. You go home smelling like delicious coffee. So I was in Chillicothe at the time in Ohio. That was my hometown. And I applied to this new coffee shop that was opening up called Roast. And they accepted me. They were just now opening up. So I was the very first employee. And I was so proud. It was one of the cool coffee shops that they the latte art and all of that. Have you guys ever been to a coffee shop that does the art on the top? Yeah? I was so proud to do that. And I was not very good at it, but I learned how to make a little heart and a rosetta and all of that stuff. I was so proud, and I thought I was the coolest person in town because I was the first real barista who knew how to do latte art in Chillicothe. And so I remember one time, like I said, this was right after high school. Tori, my older sister, was living here at the time, and I think that either she was just dating her now husband, Ethan, at the time, or maybe they were newly married. I can't remember. But no, yeah, they were dating at the time. So they were coming to visit one weekend, and they were like, can't wait to come visit you at the coffee shop. And so I was like, okay, I have to really impress them. I have to show them that I'm the best barista in town, which is funny because I was the only barista in town. And so I remember finding out that they were going to come visit me for this one shift. And so I was just waiting on them. And then all of a sudden it got really busy. And I was the only person working because it wasn't necessarily always busy. So I was the only person there. And so I was taking orders. I was making the coffee. I was trying to do the dishes all at the same time. I was checking the pastries to make sure that they weren't going to burn in the oven. I was doing all of these things at once. And I remember I was I was really stressed out, and I was frantically trying to keep everything together. And I remember I had spilled something. It was either I can't remember if it was just from doing the dishes, but there was just this big puddle in the behind the counter, and I was I don't have time to clean this up. I have drinks to make, and so people are waiting on their orders. We're kind of backed up. And I've taken everybody's order, so there's nobody else in line. And then in comes Tori and Ethan. And they come walking through the doors. They come, and I'm trying to, keep cool. I have everything under control. But I'm, so stressed out right now. But I'm what's up? And so they order their drink. And so I'm, after I was trying to keep cool, trying to act cool, just wanted them to think, man, he's a cool barista. And so I take their order. They're just standing at the counter talking to me, trying to catch up because this is the first time I've seen them. I've seen them since they were in town. So they were talking to me while I was trying to do the dishes and check the pastries and make the drinks and all of that stuff. And I remember I had this glass cappuccino cup in my hand. And you know what I did? I stepped right in that puddle and slid. But I will say, not to brag on myself, I have very good reactions. If something falls, I'm the spidey senses kind of guy. I typically catch it and have no idea how I do. So I slipped, but I caught myself. But you know where my other foot was? In that puddle. And so all of a sudden, I'm trying to catch myself while I'm sliding. It literally felt like a cartoon, where they're running in the same place. And I was like fighting for my life. I kept slipping and slipping. I was fighting for my life to try to stay aboard. And so much so, I wish I would have just gone down the first time, because I was flailing around to the point where it was getting everyone's attention in the coffee shop. And finally, I couldn't take it anymore, and I just spun around, and I slammed the coffee cup on the table, and it shattered everywhere, and I just bit the dust. And then the coffee shop just got really quiet. And top 3 things you've given your attention to this week. Good, bad, neutral, it doesn't matter, no shame. Think about it, and just write those down. It could be sports, it could be video games, it could be school, it could be anything. Friends, Snapchat, whatever it is. I'll give you just a few more minutes or seconds. We'll give you about 20 more seconds. Shh. Okay, everybody good? Okay, cool. Phones away, please, phones away. Okay, so I wanted to share with you my top 3. I did this morning, and I think that my top 3 is my marriage. If you don't know, I'm married to Kelsey. She's amazing. Also, Luke. Also, I've been running a lot over the past year. I'm training for an ultra marathon this year. So that's devoted a lot of my attention. And then I would say music as well. Those are just 3 random things that I've given my attention to this week. Would anybody like to share just like 1 or 2 of yours? Just kind of spit them out. Golf, okay. TikTok, okay. Snapchat, okay. Dogs. Wait, hold on, wait 1 second. Okay, dogs. School. Bryce Young. The weather. Oh man, that's good. Okay. Kinley. Oh, cool. Okay. Teachers / cafe workers. Okay. Anybody else over here? Bryce Young, I already wrote that one. Books. Okay, books. School lunch. Wow. You just look forward to it every day. Bible. Okay. What? YouTube. That's a good one. Okay. Anybody else? Going once? Work? Taylor Swift. Tay Swift. Bryce Young times 3. Okay. What? I don't know how to spell that. We'll keep that. Spotify. Okay, cool. I have no idea who these people are. Okay. What? The PGA Tour? I thought you said the dental something. Okay, cool. That's pretty good. We'll pause right there. Shh. Okay, attention back up here. You can go ahead and put your journals away for just a second. That was just a quick way I wanted to, high schoolers, That was just a quick way that I wanted to pause to just be able to reflect honestly, without any shame or without even being like, this is bad. I just wanted us to focus on what am I giving my attention to? Like I said, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. Am I writing marriage and I'm like, oh, it's bad that I'm focusing on my wife? No, right? That's just the way that life is. But it's good to check in to see what have we been giving our attention to. Now, there are so many different things that get our attention every day, right? Marriage, TikTok, running, music, Snapchat, Bryce Young, right? There are so many things. Shh. Hey, y'all. Hey, Ben. Shh. There are so many things that distract, or so many things that distract us, maybe for better or for worse. So many opportunities, so many challenges. If you want to go to the next slide, Nevaeh, distractions exist for all of us. That's what I wanted you to get out of that exercise. In a world full of different things trying to get our attention, how do we become people who shift more of our attention to what God is up to in the world around us? The advice we're going to look at today was written a long time ago to people in a very different world than we live in today. I'm not talking about a different planet, but just in culturally a very different world than we live today. As you probably know, if you don't know, back in the Bible times, they didn't have cell phones. They didn't have social media. They didn't have Snapchat streaks, right? They didn't have these kind of things. But although the problems they faced were different, we can still learn something from the words that were written in the New Testament. Peter was one of Jesus' closest friends and his followers, and wrote a letter which we call 1 Peter. And in 1 Peter, actually, before I read this, the people he was writing to, they were often persecuted for following Jesus to the point where they would be excommunicated from their societies, or even if it was like really serious, they would be put to death over their faith. That's not something that we actually deal with in America, which we're blessed to be able to just worship God freely. But it was different back then. And so he was writing to them to say, keep on with your faith. Keep on going with your faith. Their attention was probably pulled in all different kinds of directions with the fear of what if they find out that I'm following Jesus? Will they kill me? What will happen to me? There was fear, anxiety, social pressure, even survival had their focus on a regular basis. And Peter wrote to them, he wrote to the followers of the time, the followers of Jesus, and he says this, shh, Olivia, shh. Discipline yourselves, keep alert. Like a roaring lion, your adversary, the devil prowls around, looking for someone to devour. Peter told Jesus' followers what was the first word? Discipline yourselves. Now, that is a similar word to what they called Jesus' followers. What did they call his followers? Disciples. The word disciple comes from this word, discipline. In order to be a disciple of someone, not just Jesus, you had to discipline yourself in following the way of that teacher or the person that you looked up to. So being a disciple of Jesus, to be a disciple of Jesus is to be disciplined in the way of Jesus, the way he lived, the way he taught, the way that he loved others. It's easy for us to get distracted from the things that matter most in life, but building the discipline necessary to keep focused on our priorities can help you. It's easier, do you agree that it's easier to doom scroll than it is to be studying for an exam, right? Yeah, it's easier to doom scroll. You're like, I'll just for 5 minutes, and then 3 hours go by and you're like, what the heck? It's easier to just show up in a group chat with your friends than it is to actually initiate plans and to be with them and to look them in the eye and to hang out in person, to be with people. It's easier to think about God just once a week on a Wednesday night or a Sunday morning than it is to actually discipline yourself, to communicate, to pray to God daily, to read his scripture daily. It takes more discipline, but that's what it looks like to be a disciple of Jesus. To be disciplined in the way of Jesus. Developing personal spiritual disciplines can help us follow Jesus and grow in our faith. If you want to go to the next slide. You can think of developing that discipline by wondering what things we can do to help us grow in our faith, the things that help us spend time with God. we can be people who actually choose to slow down often enough to know what's going on in our own hearts and to be able to recognize what the Holy Spirit is doing all around us. It takes slowing down, centering our attention somewhere else. We can be people who become aware of what's distracting us so that we can refocus on what truly matters. We can be people who build habits of doing what we know is best instead of getting pulled into habits controlled by advertisers and algorithms and peer pressure and so on and so on. You have the power to actually shift your focus. What's the alternative? Peter said that if we're not intentional, there are plenty of other things out there doing their best to distract us from what matters most. In that verse we just read, Nevaeh, can you go back to that verse? What's the alternative of this? Like a roaring lion, your adversary, the devil, prowls. Now, you're probably thinking, what? Why? We're just trying to be disciplined. What does this have to do with the devil? What is an adversary? An adversary is an enemy who is working overtime to try to keep you from what is best for you. That's what an adversary is. While those things may not always be bad or wrong, like marriage or school lunch, everyone's got to eat, right? But these things can pile up and become distractions, and it's easy to fill our time with anything but God. They can work against us to bring our attention away from God. If we want to see God at work in our everyday lives, if we want to build disciplines in looking for God all around us in our everyday lives, if we want to give more of our attention to the ways we see the fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, and so on, we must start with this first step. If you want to go to that next slide, pay attention to what has your attention. As I was writing this sermon, a verse came to mind in the Sermon on the Mount where Jesus is teaching the people on the Mount, and he says this, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. It's easy for this to just think about okay, where I spend my money is where my heart is. But I think especially in today's world, there's more currency than just money itself. It's time spent. It's energy spent. It's our attention. These are all also forms of currency. Paying attention to what has our attention can help us redirect how we're spending our time, energy, and attention when needed. It can also help us to see what God is doing in our lives and help us to notice what we truly care about most. Now, I'm not saying that, I want you to hear me out. If you have zoned out and you're like, this ain't for me because I gotta eat, and I like sports, and so then I have to choose one or the other? I'm not asking you to be like a monk who doesn't do anything, doesn't eat or sleep, and just goes off on a mountaintop and just spends time with God 24/7. That's not what I'm asking you to do, unless you're I want to be a monk, then go for it, okay? But that's not what I'm asking. I'm saying that we should just be aware of what are we actually devoting our time to, because there's only 24 hours in a day. We're supposed to sleep 8 hours. I know some of y'all probably only sleep 4 hours a night, which y'all are crazy. But we have limited time, so are we carving out time to actually devote to paying attention to the Holy Spirit around us? It's not that everything is just completely unhelpful or bad or unhealthy. It's just being aware of what are we giving our time to. Pay attention to what has your attention. You'll realize that whenever you evaluate, just like we just did when we just did that simple exercise, when you start to evaluate, you'll start to recognize that you actually have 30 minutes to spare to spend time with God whenever you spend 30 minutes less doom scrolling on social media. You'll discover that you can redirect some of your time instead of getting some me time and just isolating yourself, which is necessary, especially if you're more introverted. But we can actually carve out some time to be with people, which is what you guys are doing tonight. This is such a gift that we get to hang out every single Wednesday night. It could be shifting your focus on something good like a friendship or a new hobby, and God can actually speak through those things to you as well. So, what can we do to start paying attention to what has our attention? If you want to go to the next slide. Commit to tracking your attention just for 1 week. Now, I'm not adding an extra homework assignment for you guys. You're not going to be graded on this. You're not going to be tested afterwards and being like, did you do it? If not, you're going to be kicked out. No, but we have a little worksheet that I'm going to give you guys before we break up into small groups. And just for 1 week, what I want to challenge you guys to do is every night before you go to bed, I want you to reflect on that day and what gave you what had your attention the most that day. And you're just going to write out a simple sentence. We'll explain it in just a little bit. And then at the end of the week, hold on, shh. At the end of the week, there's a little reflection at the end, but we'll pass those out at the end before we go into small groups. Now, the point of all of this is just simply to pay attention to what has your attention. And at the end of the week, reflect on where your attention is going and decide where you want it to go moving forward. It can be as simple as that. You might discover that you want to build a discipline of prayer, and you're like, I want to read my Bible more, but there's no time. This is a good place to start of being aware. What are you giving all of your time to? You might be thinking tonight that like Noah's just a grumpy person who just expects too much of me, and he doesn't want me to have any fun on social media, and he doesn't want me to have any friends. That's not true. But it's just simply, how can we actually take more control of our lives instead of letting those things rule our life? My encouragement is simply to pay attention to what has your attention this week. So you can decide where you want to build discipline. Some of you may, at the end of this week, you're like, I'm good. Like, I don't have anything to work on. My life is balanced. I'm good. That's great. I don't want to shame you or to say like, y'all are all wrong. It's just a point to check in. So as we go off into our small groups, I want you to imagine if in middle school or high school, whatever age you're at right now, what if you could build the habit of giving your attention to what God is up to in your life, other people in the world around you? How would that change your life? So as we close out and break up into small groups, I want to leave you with this question. What is one way you could give more of your attention to looking for God at work this week?